Today's question comes from Alex Toledano, who says, as we have only 4 strings, what is the best way to approach playing chords with lots of extensions? Well, we could talk for quite a while about this, but I'll do the best I can in a few minutes. This is a great question, and to answer it, first I'd better explain what Alex means. Major and minor chords consist of 3 notes, the first, third and fifth of the scale. So a C major chord, for instance, has C, the root or first note of a C major scale, E, which is the third, and G, the fifth. Now, if we add one extension on, such as a sixth, that's straightforward. We only have one note per string, so add an A to make C6 or a B flat to make C7. No problem. Now, when things get more complex, we have choices to make, and this is what Alex is getting at. Let's look beyond 6ths and 7ths. Look at ninths, for example. There are 2 different types of ninth chord you'll find when you examine sheet music. If the chord symbol says C add 9, that simply means add the ninth to the C chord, which for example you might do here or here, adding a D to your C, E and G. So an add 9 chord is just a decoration of the basic chord. Think of a C chord with the melody note D sitting on top. That D isn't really serving any harmonic function in terms of driving the chord progression along. But much more commonly when we talk about ninths, what we mean is a ninth added on top of a 7th chord. So the chord symbol C9 implies 2 extensions, the 9th and the 7th. It's important to understand that there's some shorthand going on here in the chord symbol. C9 doesn't mean a C chord with a 9th added, it means a C7 with a 9th added. Okay, C7 has 4 notes, C, E, G and B flat, and now we're adding a 9th, which is D, so we have 5 notes and only 4 strings. And this brings us to the crux of the original question: something has to be omitted. Now, if I were arranging for a choir or a group of instruments or a piano, I could spread these notes out. C, E, B flat, G, D. So I've done root, third, 7th, 5th, 9th. That's a nice voicing of the chord spread over just a little more than 3 octaves. But that's not the voice of a ukulele. On the uke, we have 4 strings tuned very close together in pitch, and much of the time we're playing 4 notes within the space of 1 octave. When you look at the notes in that 9th chord, you'll see that there are 3 consecutive pitches, B flat, C and D. The 7th, root and 9th are all next to each other, and in a compact voicing that could sound a little bit cluttered. So I'd strongly consider omitting the root. That would leave us with E, G, B flat and D. Here are a couple of inversions of C9 without the root. You still have the interval of a diminished 5th between the E and the B flat, which is giving the chord its pull towards F. So it's still functioning as a C7, that is the dominant 7th in the key of F, despite losing the root, C. And if the musical context demands it to work as a C7, the listener should mentally hear the C in the bass, even though it's not there. Now, that kind of statement sometimes causes raised eyebrows. How can a note be implied if no one's actually playing it? Well, music is a language, and like in any other language, if someone uses an abbreviation in speech, we still understand them, as long as it makes sense in the context. We don't have to consciously interpret the meaning. Let me give you an example. Here in the UK, we call the accident and emergency unit at a hospital A&E. So if you had a saucepan stuck on your head and I said, I can't get it off, I'll have to take you to A&E, you'd know exactly what I meant, and you'd know without having to consciously reconstruct the missing letters of the words. You'd just understand it automatically. On the other hand, if I was just sitting around reading a newspaper and I said out of the blue, A and E, you'd say, what? What are you doing? A crossword? Give me a clue. The brain would fill in the meaning depending on the situation, as long as the listener has a certain level of literacy in the language being used. Now, how's that relating to music? Well, in isolation, you might look at this chord and say E, G, B flat, D. That's an E minor 7 with a flat 5th. You might hear it and think, oh, that's going to move to A7. Sounds a logical progression. But In the context of a simple F major chord progression, see what happens. At no point did you feel drawn towards A7. The C9 resolved very naturally on F. So the point is, don't worry about losing the root. Now there's no hard and fast rule here. We could have omitted a different note. Compare these two versions of G9. Here it is without the root, but with the third, and here it is without the third. Without the root in this first version, we still had the discord that drives it to resolve. This version without the third is a much more placid chord. It doesn't have the same sense of purpose. Now, if you specifically wanted an artistic effect of stillness and tranquility, you might prefer that. But most of the time on the ukulele, we're conscious of trying to create the most powerful effect we can with limited resources. And more often than not, we'll get the best results with the fullest and most colourful sounding chords. The 13th is a lovely jazzy sound. We'll use C again to keep things simple. If you count up the scale 13 notes from C, you'll land on A. So what's the difference between C13 and C6, which is just C, E, G and A? Well, in the 13th, we add the 6th on top of the 7th chord. So we have a nice juicy clash between the B flat and the A. The easiest way to create it is this. But it's not very effective because the one stopped string struggles to compete with the volume of 3 open strings, and we hardly hear the B flat. Here's a better version. There we hear everything nicely balanced. The 7th, 3rd, 13th, or 6th because we've put it down in the same octave as the 7th, and root. We've missed the 5th out, but we don't need it. In fact, hear how strongly the A sounds like it wants to move down to G, because it's clashing with the B flat. Can you hear it pulling down? It wants to move. There. So it's good that we've omitted the G, because if it was already there, it'd spoil the effect of that A wanting to move to it. Here's another 13th shape. F13 with the 13th on the top. Again, we're omitting the 5th, and that's good because we can hear that D wanting to fall to C. So although the 5th isn't in the chord, we're not missing it. In fact, we're better off without it. Very often we add a 9th to a 13th chord. Here we go. Now we've omitted the root and the 5th, but it doesn't matter. We still have lovely tensions in the chord. The 7th is clashing with the 3rd and the 6th, and it still sounds like an F chord that wants to resolve to B flat. So to sum up this brief look at chord extensions, don't feel disadvantaged just because we only have 4 strings. Remember the principles we talked about here, and even when it gets super jazzy, let's think of an example. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, sharp 11, 13. You know what? That actually sounds a bit on the thick side. Let's just take the top 4 notes. Wow, we've still got a full sounding, perfectly functioning chord. In fact, the more extensions we have, the more able we are to dispense with the fundamental notes of the basic triad. And we may gain a bit of clarity.